Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17th Shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today, we will be talking about the Well of Ascension. Joining me is Jessie.
Hello, I'm Lady Lameness.
Ian.
Hey, I'm your writer.
Matt.
Comatose on the forums and Discord.
Kadie.
I'm Aon Ene everywhere.
Eric.
I'm Chaos.
And I am Mish, or firstRainbowRose. This episode will be our full Cosmere spoiler episode. The most recently released book is Rhythm of War, so we will have spoilers up through Rhythm of War.
Yep.
If they're relevant. We don't guarantee they're Rhythm of War spoilers, but...
But let me just say, it's been a long time since I reread Well of Ascension. And man, we have learned a lot of Cosmere stuff since the first time I read it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I still remember you being on the Time Waster's Guide and asking questions. I guess it was more of Hero, but compared with what we were asking back then,
things have gotten a bit out of control. I mean, not really, but I think it's fine. Coming from our last episode about the Chandra and Kolos being immune to emotional allomancy. And I was thinking about this as to why that might be. And I feel like that could just be because, like, they're invested a bit more with the spikes. And maybe, like, if you're a Radiant holding Stormlight, that would make you similarly resistant. Because, you know, like investiture affecting other investiture, maybe.
That does make sense.
That's my little theory that I came up when we were just recording the last one.
That is, entirely possible. But also, it's said that the Lord Ruler specifically designed that flaw into them. So it might be, like, part of, like, the design is, like, part of that might be there's extra investiture there as a shield, as part of the mechanics of hemalurgy.
Like, how much could the Lord Ruler actually design these things? Like, that's something that, what? How much control would he have over the hemalurgic constructs? I don't know.
Maybe it was because, like, what he figured out the hemalurgic constructs he knew for the most part while he held the power. And then afterward, he tried to find more. So maybe he, like, searched out spike combinations, placements, amounts that would have this result, that would have this flaw. And it's less that he created the flaw and more that he chose designs that included it.
Yeah. I think it'd have to be more like that, right?
Speaking of hemalurgy, we ended up discussing or needing to move on to this topic about how much hemalurgy is actually shown up in this book. Because
a lot of spikes.
A lot of spikes that are just random, like Zane and his spike.
Like, Zane's spike is, like, really, I feel very well foreshadowed, because Vin does remark consistently that he's very skilled with his iron pushes. Yeah. Like, he's able to do, like, the floating thing and, like, rotating on the one anchor.
Sits sideways on a wall at one point.
Yeah.
And part of that is he got it from his spike, which is a very blink and you miss it reveal. Like,
oh, I did miss it.
Yeah.
Both times or just the first time?
Just the first time.
I loved reading, speaking of Zane's spike, I loved reading this book, knowing what's going on with the voice in his head and Ruin and the fact, you're not mad. I remember reading that. That's the funny thing. You were never insane. And I remember because I had to wait for Hero of Ages to get an explanation and being so confused by what in the world that could even possibly mean. And of course, by the time the book came out, I'd completely forgotten about it. But
and of course I didn't tell you to murder her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like that part.
Such a good line.
Oh, that's so good.
What I like about the spike, like, Zane is really, I think, an important character for the overall mystery of the first trilogy, because he's setting up, like, the concept of spikes can be used in non-traditional ways. Like, you don't have to be an inquisitor. the concept of people who are unstable or people who with spikes are hearing voices from this entity. Like, those are things that are very key to when you start remembering, oh, Vin has this earring that she keeps remarking having in, and her mom was crazy. Like, I don't think the Vin reveal would have worked if we didn't have Zane in this book.
That is true. That is true. You are right.
It's pretty vital foreshadowing in that way.
Yeah, and Vin and her earring and being in the well, and she mentions dropping her medals, which whatever, but the one that you don't catch until afterward is the fact that the spike in her ear burns her, and that's what prompts her. Like, her medals, her Mistborn medals, her vials don't impact her, but she drops them after the spike does.
Yeah. Powers of ruin and preservation. Direct contact.
Because I like that, because it's like the implication there when you're first reading it is like, oh, metal just hurts you if it's on you, which isn't the case. It's the hemolytic spike. But she doesn't make that connection in the moment, which makes it hard for the reader to make it in the moment.
But in retrospect, totally makes sense. Yep. Love that. Speaking of ruin and preservation, I've been holding in all 4 of these episodes about the Mist Spirit, because there's so much weird Mist Spirit stuff.
There is.
And so obviously the one we see the most is preservation, right? Obviously. But there is one that just has hateful eyes, like super hateful eyes, and I assume that that's ruin.
See, that's what I'm not sure on.
As well, right? Because shouldn't ruin be in dark?
Remind me of this scene, because apparently I wasn't paying as close attention as I should have.
Well, I don't know if it's the same one Eric is thinking of, but I also marked on a weird Mist Spirit scene, which is Vin, when like she finds a Mist Spirit standing over Elend in the tent, where it's like standing with the knife. Which I'm like, that's not a very preservation-y action, but I don't think it can be ruin yet, because ruin can't impact the world.
I think that's playing into Vin's fears, because she spends the entire book fearing that the Mist Spirit is going to do something to harm Elend, because that's what the logbook said that the Mist Spirit did, and the only reason why actually now I'm wondering, why did the Mist Spirit kill? Like, in the end, he harms Elend to try and force Vin to use the power to convince her into doing the right thing.
But that was Kelsier. Like, Kelsier forced that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. I haven't.
So it's like knowing that, it's like, what is Laros doing with the spike here? With his knife here?
Why does he do it in the logbook to
Alendi?
Yeah, because I assume that's ruin, though, right? Because it's like a dark shadow that Alendi describes.
No.
In the logbook.
Does he?
It's not white.
I hadn't got that.
Well, Dark Mist. Remember when Dark Mist was going to be a thing after Hero of Ages? And Brandon was like, hey, there's going to be 2 kinds of mists. Never saw that again, despite the giant chamber here that has the Dark Mist, which is ruin stuff. Like that massive chamber that had all of it. And there, in the middle of the mist, was the spirit, standing directly above Elend. It wasn't even really there. It was just an outline in the mist, repeating pattern caused by chaotic movements. And yet it was real. She could feel it, and she could see it. See it as it looked up, meeting her gaze with invisible eyes, hateful eyes. And it raised an insubstantial arm, and Vin saw something flash. And then she, felt pain near where her spike was, I think?
No.
It was a little weird.
She raises a dagger to meet the knife, and then it, makes her whole arm tingle.
Yeah, a powerful numbing chill in her arms, the hair over her entire body prickled. And I'm like, Vin saw something flash, it's... what is happening there? I have no idea what's going on.
I think that's the knife.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be the knife flashing, but
it definitely hateful eyes. That's weird.
See, it's the hateful eyes makes me think it isn't Ruin, because Ruin doesn't hate Vin. Vin's the one that's gonna get him out of there.
I guess that's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least it's less crazy than the original Well of Ascension, where there were 4 misspirits and 1 was endowment. Remember that? That's weird.
Yeah, I've read that scene.
It's really weird. We'll put it in
there
the
is
link in the
deleted
description.
scenes are on Brandon's website. Like, you should read them sometime. They're weird.
They're very weird.
I know I read that at some point, but I can't remember.
I just remember 1 was endowment. I'm like, what? Yeah, I don't know. But this misspirit is very weird. It's interesting that Laras can like basically use allomancy, kind of like with soothing. Like, clearly the misspirit like sort of had a copper cloud around. Like, only Vin could do it because she could pierce copper clouds.
Yeah,
that was made pretty clear here. The misspirits are still like kind of confusing.
Yes.
So I feel like in that scene when Preservation's trying to attack Elend, Preservation wouldn't have been able to, because like in Secret History, Kelsier needed to actually do it. It's just Preservation's trying and just can't, right?
And so maybe that's what Preservation is doing here. But I feel like killing Elend would make Vin go back. Like,
yeah, like in that scene, yeah. I don't know. Laras is dumb.
That whole sequence is a bit iffy.
It's so weird.
Here, this is my attempt to rationalize this.
Okay.
We know, like, from the prophecies and stuff that like Preservation has a lot of future sight. We know Fuzz Preservation Laras is like degrading, so maybe he's starting to like get mentally displaced within the timeline, and he like in that moment maybe he is for a moment thinking he's at the well, this like event that he's kind of seen coming.
Sure. And he's just a little confused.
Yeah.
I could buy it.
Not necessarily like keeping temporarily displaced, but like he knows like, okay, I need to stab this guy.
Yeah.
At some point. Is this now or?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So like,
that's a good idea, Matt. I like.
Yeah, he's getting like
that's probably the best idea.
Yeah.
Just hateful eyes. I immediately go to Odie. I'm like, what is happening? But yeah, why would Ruin hate? So that would mean that the dark shadowy misspirit that stabbed Fennec would probably have been Ruin. Actually,
I always assumed the misspirit is the same in both. Like I didn't know that it was described as being darker than the current misspirit. I just always assumed that it was Preservation in both.
Let me look.
Yeah, but it would make more sense though that it would need to be Ruin, because again, what good does it do to stab him, especially if he's not near the well?
Fennec was stabbed when he tried to sample the waters of the Black Lake.
Black Lake. Oh my god. There's so much crap in those Alendi.
That also makes me think it could be Preservation.
I guess that's true, huh?
Because like I don't think Ruin could manifest a misspirit until like he got released. Yeah. By the way, misspirits, that's what a Shardic avatar should be. Because that's what avatar actually means.
Thinking about
that out there.
It is interesting comparing the misspirit to like when cultivation shows up like in the flesh. Do we see any other shards show up kind of where they
honor-ish?
Odium
not honor. Honor only shows up in visions.
Yeah.
But Odium.
That's the ish. Yeah, but Odium
shows up during the Battle of Thelen Fields.
Yeah.
We do see Laras as well. Like in the flesh. In Secret History.
That's in the cognitive realm. Well, well, that's basically what the misspirit looks like in the cognitive realm. That was always my perception.
Okay.
Wherever like that is in the cognitive realm, like the misspirit is in the physical.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's what I like about seeing the contrast is you see like this is a shard who isn't fully together, right? So they're maybe they're in the cognitive, not as much in the physical. And so then comparing that to like when cultivation and Odium do it, it's a kind of cool difference.
I got the epigraph, and like it is referenced in Well of Ascension as well. When Vin's looking up the misspirit. And so this is it. It isn't a shadow. This dark thing that follows me, the thing only I can see. It isn't really a shadow. It's blackish and translucent, but it doesn't have a shadow-like solid outline. it's insubstantial, wispy, and formless, like it's made out of a dark fog or mist, perhaps. And I'm like, but the mist spirit's never described as a dark fog, ever. It's just like made of the regular mist stuff, right?
But is that because like the people in Vin's time are more familiar with mist?
Yeah, it is a bit weird because Lundy's like, oh, we're free of the deepness up here in the mountains.
Yeah, I don't know. I would just interpret that as like, oh, like it's dark because it's kind of like formless and it's like mist where there isn't mist. Whereas Vin is always seeing it at night.
In like the mist.
In the mist.
Yeah, I guess. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying it's confusing, okay? These damn mist spirits.
Also, I'm not sure, did Brandon have... I guess he did have the whole, like, ruin preservation, black and white duality figured out already.
He put the shadowy room with all the smoke that's presumably... Yeah,
and he had written all three before he revised Final Empire, so it could have changed if he wanted to make sense.
So do you guys think that it's ruin or preservation talking to Sazed at the end with the rings and being like, you're right?
Yeah, that is weird.
Well, in the graphic audio, it's Kelsier's voice that gets used.
That's been...
Which I'm like, I don't think that's actually Kelsier, so that's an interesting choice.
It was meant to be, but then, like, of course it couldn't happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Brandon's kind of hedged his bets on that, right?
I think it was preservation trying to get Caesar to stop Vin. And that's why Marsh was there to stop Caesar from stopping Vin.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That one really stood out to me, especially with, because I was more aware of the voices and where the source was.
Yeah.
But that one is, and because we find out in Era 2, talking to somebody is of
ruin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and listening, preservation can hear and ruin can project.
No, there are exceptions to that because Kelsier does talk to Spook and Vin while holding preservation in Hero of Ages.
Yeah.
And there's also like, there's a couple moments where like the Reen voice, I'm like, is that ruin? Like usually near the end of the book. And then also in the logbook, Alendi in his last entry describes like feeling this like projection of like, or this message of peace that someone will come and take over for him if he fails.
Oh, right. Yeah. The very last one.
Yeah. And so, it does kind of seem like there might be some...
That might be preservation instead of ruin.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Oh, man.
I just have a quick thing kind of going back to the hemalurgy discussion from earlier. Sazed has the great line of, I had no idea those spikes stole your soul as well as your eyes. And I'm like,
that was good.
Technically they didn't steal his soul. They stole other people's souls.
It just so happens that with the spike, Ruin's controlling him. So,
Yeah. It's less of lost a soul and more of gained a soul.
Yeah.
Or
several, in fact. 9 to 11. Later, even more. I wanted to talk about how weird of a perpendicularity the well is.
Yeah.
It's a really weird perpendicularity. I don't know how much there is to talk about, but I mean, obviously preservation designed that perpendicularity in a very specific way as that ruin prison, right? So there's a lot of room for weirdness.
And you can apparently use it without taking up the power because Hoyt goes through it.
Yeah, you can do that, but even there's actually two ways that your statement can be interpreted because there were people who took the power before Alendi, but just differently.
Yeah. No, I was thinking like literally in the story during book 2 because Kelsey is there and Hoyt goes through and punches him and leaves. But it means he went through the well while it was filling with this power and just didn't have to take the power and just left it and moved on.
They did say that Vin needed to be... Oh, wait, no, the well attuned her to take up preservation.
Oh, boy, the attunement. Oh, boy, we're getting it right in old things.
What's interesting, though, is like remembering that a perpendicularity, like the purpose that world hoppers use it for, like to transition between worlds, isn't why they're created. That's a byproduct, because what they are is a concentration of a shard's power. So preservation has concentrated its power there to imprison ruin. And as a byproduct, it creates a portal where the realms are close together. And I think Chris says, like, Chris seems to think that that would be unusable for most people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Boyd's like, this is not a good perpendicularity to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like.
Well, because he specifically says because ruin is imprisoned there. It's like you usually don't want to go through a perpendicularity that is capturing a dark god. Yeah, it's like my read was that like at the end of the day, the well is still a perpendicularity, so it can do all the normal perpendicularity things if you know how to do that.
And it presumably if it's full enough, like right, because you couldn't use it. Like right after Vin released the power, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like you still maybe.
I feel like you still could.
The pool's gone.
That was the extra power, wasn't it? That preservation was using to hold ruin. Like that's what got released, not all of preservation.
Yeah.
That brings up an interesting point. We've never really had a satisfactory explanation for why this whole, like, if the power is there imprisoning ruin, what is filling? You use the power, you shoot it out into the planet, and then it slowly like trickles back over the 1,024 years or whatever the cycle is.
Yeah. The metaphor is always like the water cycle. Like this is just where that power accumulates.
Spiritual condensation.
Spiritual condensation
is a really good way of putting it.
There.
I mean, it's just the same thing as the pits. Why is it just the pits that are that single location?
Because that's the ruins perpendicularity.
Yeah, it's there.
Well, but no, it's less the single location that trips me up, and why isn't it just there? Like, why is it like refilling?
Why does it take so long to refill?
Or like, why does it refill at all? Like, why is it used and then like I've never. I think
condensation is actually a really good.
No, but it's more that like if it's acting as the prison, shouldn't it always be there?
Yeah.
I think is your point, Matt?
Yeah. It's going to put some thoughts out there. The fact that this is the Cosmere, I can't just use story logic like in other.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because like I particularly like stories that have worlds that run on story logic, like as part of the world building.
Yes. Right. The well refilling is cool story wise. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But getting into it, it's like preservation made a prison for ruin. Prisons but he couldn't just like seal him for all of eternity. There needed to be a door, there needed to be a lock. Like there needed to be a mechanism for ruin to be released. But like it's stupid to have that lock accessible all of the time because anybody that stumbles upon it could accidentally release it. So it's like, okay, it's like we're going to have this mechanism where it's like you could only get at the lock every 1,024 years, but which is like the millennial power. It's what Quan calls it, which is I love that.
I love that too.
I wish we knew more about the pre-Alendi users of the well.
Yes, maybe one of them is Lutha.
And their understanding of their knowledge of like the power and mythology around it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Brandon said he's not going to write I would love like a pre-classical Scadrial prequel so much.
Yeah.
Idea for it is maybe it's like regrowing body parts. You know, the biggest piece of preservation is there, so it's like regrowing. You chop off somebody's head and it regrows the head instead of regrowing the body, and same thing there of the excess is regrown into the pool.
But I feel like the most of preservation, like it's like, well, it's the planet, but that doesn't count but like the mists are the bulk of the power.
Yeah.
But then we get into this whole division where you have like the Atium that's not Atium is Ruin's body.
Oh boy.
And he needs his body back and his mind is in like there's still a lot of stuff about the whole prison.
It's honestly more weird now that we know more, right?
Yeah.
Like
the conditions of Ruin, like what Ruin needs to like be back at full power, have never really fully made sense.
What does Ruin do with the atium? He metabolizes it. Yep, that's what happens. Sure, I guess. I don't know. Why does the well refill every 1,000 years? Like, why did there need to be a lock? Like, I don't know. Because
that gets into like in like a story-based logic world. Like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, you need to have a lock to have a prison. Like that just makes sense.
Sure.
Cosmere is like, do you need to have a lock to have a prison?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly.
Well, I mean, unless it's going into the spiritual ideal of a prison.
Sure, why not?
And arguably, if preservation had some inkling that what, say, Zed ends up doing is possible, because if you kind of see this whole Ruin being imprisoned thing maybe has diminishing returns over time, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe preservation foresaw that, like, maybe at some point Ruin will need to get released so that something different can happen.
Yeah. Exactly. It was a delaying tactic, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. He knew Ruin needed to get released eventually. So yeah, I guess that's fair. You need
you need a lock. And I really like that interpretation of we're only making the lock available at certain times, because if it is a delaying tactic,
you would want to delay it to,
every cycle you buy yourself another 1,000 years.
Right.
That's super handy.
Yeah, I was actually going to spin off of the preservation for potentially foreseeing what happens with Sazed. One, like, Tyndall has a great line of Sazed being strong like the wind, which I feel like does kind of foreshadow him like becoming a shard and becoming the wind, more or less.
Yeah.
But also, during one of their like research things,
sessions,
like, when they're researching the Rabzine, which is the Clenium, or as the graphic audio says, Helenium.
Sure, why not?
Which is interesting choice, which I think is what the KH is supposed to be pronounced by.
Oh, okay. Neat.
I can't do that reliably. So Clenium.
Yeah, sure.
But it's like, the Rabzine is said to be he who is not of his people, yet fulfills all their wishes, which I feel like does like foreshadow Sazed so well. He is not part of the synod word.
Yeah, sure.
But like, he is the perfect terraceman. It's like, it's remarked, but Tinwell remarks on it. It's like, you uphold like all of our beliefs, but like,
you should be leading us.
You should be leading us, but like, you are like exiled.
He leads them eventually, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. So it's just like, that's a piece of foreshadowing like I've never actually seen anybody pick up on, which it's probably been discussed and I've just missed it. I just like, it's not one that gets brought up in Hero of Ages, I think.
I definitely enjoyed all of the hints that we get to the Hero of Ages in the research and in the epigraphs, like being able to link that to Sazed, now that you know that he is the eventual Hero of Ages. Like, yep, he fits all these points. He fits them very well.
I loved watching Sazed's arc in this book for actually his religion. And because the religions come up a lot more often, and what they believe in come up. And it was so fun to see, like, oh, they believed in art and color was the most important thing. And then being able to watch those hints being dropped, knowing what was coming, and how his belief that all of them hold a piece of the truth ends up being the true answer of, oh, well, the artists were very passionate about the colors of the world, and now I know what the world's colors should be. Yeah. And just seeing the foreshadowing of those religions being able to be actually relevant.
I'm going to need all these different religions, so I need time to blab about them so they're not coming out of nowhere. It's that sort of thing that makes me very excited for Mistborn Era 3, because Brandon's going to write it straight through again, right? Because you get those foreshadowing that I don't think you would get otherwise.
Yeah.
Right?
It's much harder to do that book by book.
Yeah, it's much easier to be like, okay, I need a religion in this slot, and I know I need it for this.
It's like we also got a couple of those in Final Empire, but just continually being dropped all of the time.
Yeah, we got the original Trell religion in Final Empire.
Yeah, oh boy.
Yep.
I always forget one's Trellism and one's Trelligism.
Trelligism is the original religion.
Right.
Trellism is heir to.
Yeah.
And Trell's a guy, a foreman on Telsane.
Apparently.
It's a dude.
Sure.
So weird. Yeah, sure, why not? There's a lot of stuff in here that is still like kind of odd, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember when we first read this, making the first connection between the well and the pool in Elantris.
Yes,
and that was one of the first, wait a minute.
There's something here.
Like, besides Hoyd showing up, which, Hoyd is Hoyd, but...
I watched for Hoyd in this one, and I'm still... Eric, was it you who finally figured out who it was, or...
I think it was me.
He's not mentioned by name in this one.
He is Harris coming back, right?
Yeah.
I watched for him in this scene, and he's basically impossible to spot in this book.
But he wants to be hidden. He can be very good at it.
His here is a lot trickier than in the other books.
Final Empire,
yeah.
I forgot he was in this book at all.
Yeah, he's one of the terrorist refugees, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's the leader of the terrorist refugees that Ellen talks to.
Yeah, the one that's like, oh, well, we were coming from Terrace. That's supposed to be Hoyd, but he's not given his...
Okay.
He's not given his normal descriptors. He's not mentioned by name. It's very, very hard to spot him.
Do we only know that by Wob, or did someone actually figure that out at some point?
I actually was the one that confirmed it. Somebody figured it out, and I was like, it was like, is Hoyd in Hero of Ages this person? And Brandon was like, yeah, I think you've got the right person. Yeah, it's supposed to be, when the terrorists are coming back, there's one terroristman who's supposed to be way more knowledgeable and way more interested in what's going on than the rest of them. Mm-hmm. And that was Brandon confirming that it is supposed to be Hoyd.
Which I think that's alluding to, like, at one point, Brandon wanted to write a Hoyd parallel novel of, like, what was going on. Because, like, Hoyd went to Terrace for a reason that we don't know what that reason was.
Yep, went through the well to do it, too.
Mm-hmm. That actually makes me think of, like, the question of whether or not you could use the well as perpendicularity to go through between realms after it gets used. Probably not, because the normal perpendicularity to use on Scadrial is the Pits of Hathsin, and you couldn't use that after Kelsier destroyed all the geodes.
Yep.
Which then prompts the question, how does Hoyd get off of Scadrial? Because the well's just been used up. The pits, he has in Secret History said that one's destroyed, so how does he get off of Scadrial?
I mean, presumably there were some changes after Harmony happened. Mm-hmm. We don't know if Harmony has a perpendicularity. I don't know. I mean, he didn't talk with Harmony directly, because Harmony's still like, who's this guy?
We know Chris is able to come to the physical realm in Era 2. So we know there's some means.
Hoyd got trapped for a while.
He's used to it. He does that sometimes.
Speaking of foreshadowing, and this quote actually got brought up in our last episode as well, talking about the Kolos, and they turn up in this book and they go, "We are humans, we will live in your city, we will kill you, and we will take it." That's a pretty blatant connection to who the Kolos are and how they are created, and that really jumped out to me. Because once you know, it's like, oh wow, okay, that was really in your face. Wouldn't have picked up on it otherwise.
Yeah, because the first time you're just like, you guys are creepy.
You're just terrifying.
You guys are crazy. But no, I remember reading that and going, oh, poor human.
And with the nails, right, that they say, like, oh, there's weird nails with the Kolos. I don't know what's up with that, you know?
Yeah.
It's also fun, this book, like, the way Brandon uses, like, threes and, like, rolls, so it's like, the Vin servant role. Like Sazed is the first Vin servant, and then he becomes a main character. Tensoon is the second Vin servant, and then he becomes a main character. Yeah. And then in the third book, we get Human, who like kind of feels like Brandon just threw Human in to like complete the set.
And so much to do in Hero of Ages, right?
Oh yeah. But we get like the Terrace, the Kandra, the Kolos as these kind of outsiders. He also does it like with the magic systems. Like we get Allomancy with like hints of Furukami, and then this book we get Furukami with a development of Allomancy, but then hints, very subtle hints of Hemalurgy.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember too, where did we get the name Hemalurgy from? Because I remember
it was in an annotation.
An annotation.
Because he talks about it in the Final Empire annotations, that there are 3 powers. He just like straight up says it. And he also talks about how like Feruchemy was originally called Hemalurgy. I think he talks about that in the Final Empire annotations. And he's like, Hemalurgy has to do something else. And then we're just like, well, what does that mean? We kind of figured it had to do with the spikes, but we didn't know how specifically.
Because I hadn't remembered it hadn't been mentioned in the books until book 3, and that's probably why.
Yeah.
When it finally came up in book 3, like it jumped out to me. I was like, actually, we haven't seen this word yet.
And it's already explicitly in the epigraphs of book 3.
It's already Brandon, like, sort of integrating WoB knowledge into the book. Like, we didn't really have words of Brandon for, like, way back, kind of, but not really. That's just Brandon talking. But, like, oh, people know things from the annotations if they read them. Neat, but I still need to put it in the book so that people know what's going on, right?
Yeah. It is interesting, this book. I didn't feel this rereading Final Empire. I think because I've just reread Final Empire a lot of times for, like, roleplay purposes or, like, reading the culture and stuff. This book really put me back in my headspace of theorizing, because my, like, when I really got into theorizing was between Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages. So
that's how you and I met.
That's how we met. So reading this book again, really, like, I was having like flashbacks of like, oh yeah, like this, like, because we obsessed over like, well, even like the ruin and preservation names are revealed.
Yeah, when that Tensoon just name drop, like, what? Yeah. What? And like, it's so easy, like, blink and you miss it. But like, that's critical world building things. And I didn't realize
capital R ruin, and we are of capital P preservation.
It really put into perspective how much Hero of Ages epigraphs needed to exist to sort of explain things. Because, like, by the end of Well of Ascension, you really don't know that much. It's like, really, there's some, like, things that are going on that you really kind of need a narrator to, like, and this is why this happened. I'm like, oh, great, thanks. That's very helpful, actually. Because you don't. But I'm totally with you. This book took me right back to how I felt originally. I'm not even sure if I ever reread this book in full. Maybe like the end, maybe, but I can't remember, which maybe means I didn't.
I think the last time I reread this book was in the lead up to Secret History, so it's been a while.
Yeah, right, yeah. Maybe I reread it for that. Yeah.
But I do recall, Eric, you mentioning rereading this book and skipping all the Zane parts. Like, I do
possible. Yeah,
I do recall. So
that sounds like something I would do. Yeah,
this might be the first time you've reread Zane.
The Zane stuff. Yeah, and be like, okay, let's give it a fair shake. Like Matt and other people, because like Matt, you were always on the train of like, oh, Well of Ascension's really good. Like the Zane stuff has purpose and stuff. I'm like, okay, Matt. Okay, fine.
Like, I have to agree with you. It is the weakest of the 3, but
it's still good. It's still good. Like, you get to that ending. Just, Alendi must not reach the Well of Ascension. ... Oh, it's so good. I love the mystery of the epigraphs. I think these are my favorite epigraphs because of that. Like, Stormlight epigraphs have never been as cool as this one has.
No.
And even like Final Empires are like, there is interesting things there, but it's also kind of weird and boring. Whereas this one has like a central mystery and it's resolved in this book. I'm like, so good. I love it so much.
And Quan is kind of sassy, Like,
that
I
helps
like
too.
Quan's voice a lot. It makes me sad that we never get to see Quan on screen. He's like,
I'm prone to ramble, even though I'm in this ice cave carving this into a sheet of metal. Hilarious. Like, you spent a long time writing all these words. Jeez.
And this is the guy who we know from Alendi's epigraphs, who's one of his prime research areas is whether trees can think, which I think is like, this guy was like realm aware and was doing research on like the cognitive realm.
I think we do have some things that the Worldbringers they did have some Cosmere awareness, right? I think.
Or at least like they were approaching that point. Like, I don't think they knew it was like there's a cognitive and spiritual realm, but they're starting to figure out that like their cognitive and like spiritual things are important. Like,
so figuring out
what does that mean?
Yeah. Do trees have a cognitive aspect? Maybe would be a more technical way. Of course, Alendi, though, doesn't know this. So he's like, oh, yeah, he was trying to figure out if trees could think or something.
It is just so good. Like even though there is some weirdness with Mistborn Era 1 and Elantris, frankly, with these early Cosmere things, there's also these like, oh, the three realms. Let's just sneak that right in there. Like, oh, Brandon, it's so good.
So early.
I wanted to touch back on the scene where Vin defeats Zane without using Atium herself, and by doing so based off what he's thinking that she's going to do, she responds to and hence is able to win. And it just makes me think a lot of Electrum and how it's described in Hero of Ages mechanically. And I just remember reading that description. I was like, oh, so what Vin did is basically what Electrum does, and she was just able to do it without Electrum. And I think that's kind of and it's a nice foreshadow that there is maybe something that can do that, or that when it turns up, it's like, oh, this has already been touched on. This isn't coming out of just anywhere.
Yeah, especially because like Electrum in Hero of Ages is just like, isn't it like just mentioned once, like in one battle? Like they don't really use it very much.
I think it comes up at the beginning, and it just kind of comes up more as you can use it to block Atium shadows, and that's it. Like that's just like that's it.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Whereas Vid actually uses it for another purpose in the way that it could have been used if she had the metal.
Yeah, like if it was in Final Empire time, like every Mistborn would use Electrum, right? Like all the time.
I think part of why it gets introduced in Hero of Ages is like, well, Vin has solved the Atium problem, but like we don't, like, Brennan doesn't want to spend like the time every fight scene where she's fighting somebody that's using Atium to like, she stays still and watches their move.
Yeah.
So it's just like, like this is the get out of jail free card with Atium, just burn it and you're fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think also that trick probably only works, it would have diminishing returns, like as the Atium burner catches on to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you could do it for a like protracted fight.
Yeah.
Like, I think
no.
Vin was able to use it like to choose her moment
and kill him.
Kill him. Similar to Shan, the trick of turning off your Atium and then turning it back on at the last minute, I think is what she does to beat Shan. Like it's a...
You either do it in the right moment or you die. You only get one choice.
Yep, pretty much.
The other thing that jumped out to me in this reread was the supply catches and the foreshadowing for when they're going to come up in the next book. Both when they find the underground lair that the Lord Ruler has set up near the well, but also Elin talks a couple of times about how they have supplies of food and how it is tinned food, and how that is important going forward into the next book.
And the map on the wall and the... Why do they have these cities marked? And I remember thinking as I was like, oh, look, it's the stockpiles.
Yeah.
Also, how quickly we get into the like Atium missing thing. Like at the beginning when they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we never found the Atium. We sold the Lord Ruler's bracers that didn't have a lot of Atium in them.
I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, you're right. It is cool how there's just the central concept like, oh no, we're really poor. Kelsier thought we'd be rich as thieves, like just super rich, and we're not.
And then how Breeze, in the setup for Breeze is that they're like, oh, we were getting the rumors we don't have the ADM, but then when Breeze realized, oh wait, no, we need to bring another army here to make a stalemate, Breeze starts spreading rumors. Oh no, Luthadel does have the ADM. Like they absolutely have it.
But with the Lord Ruler's bracers, given bands of mourning, I read that again. I'm like, wait. They sold the Lord Rulers Adium bracers.
Because there were no bands of mourning.
There wasn't.
Lore.
No. But there was apparently. Like Vendel said, even before the Catasendra, people knew, if you picked up the bracers, you got all his powers. What? No,
was that actually from Akandra that said that?
Yes, Vendel says it at the beginning of bands, that the mythology is like very extensive. Like, what the hell does that mean, Vendel?
It's true because people didn't know about the Lord Ruler's bracers because he kept it a secret.
Vendel specifically says that, and every time I read bands, I'm like, how is that even possible that there was mythology about that?
This feels like a rumor that mythology that has been built up and then extended backwards in time, and like Kadra aren't immune to that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I still don't like it. It feels like an inconsistency. I don't like it, Brandon.
But it is interesting that here, I didn't notice this before, but it does say, actually, there wasn't a lot of ADM in the bracers.
Yeah.
Which we know now they were made out of multiple different metals. If they are the same.
Which they are.
I definitely don't think they're any related at all.
They have to be made completely differently.
It does imply that the ones the Lord Ruler actually used also were not just made of Atium, because Elan does say, actually there wasn't that much Atium in the...
like the Lord Ruler must have had like at least gold mines. Like that's just completely irresponsible to not have gold mines if you're the Lord Ruler. That's insane.
Yeah.
Right? And presumably everything else, but the Lord Ruler should have killed Vin. Just saying. Mind control the Inquisitors to just stab her. The Lord Ruler can do this. Easy peasy. Just use mental speed. Easy peasy. So many ways for the Lord Ruler to kill Vin. But that's what you get for living for 1,000 years, and you don't think the tiny Mistborn girl is good enough.
Yeah.
And you don't think the Mists will cheat. So, that helps too.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Because Vin wasn't good enough to beat him.
Yeah, right, yeah.
What he failed to anticipate was the mist.
Yeah.
That was another glorious foreshadowing that shows up here, is the fact that the mists pull away from Vin.
Yeah.
And they mention that 2 or 3 times. Like the mists are seem to be pulled away from both Vin and Zane.
Yep. Very subtle.
Well, then thank you for watching. You can find us at 17thshard.com for all the news, discussion, theories, and funds that you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube, and you can also support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.